The Babylon Project was our last best hope for sci-fi, a self-contained podcast 1 hour long located on the internet, a place of fun and discussion for Babylon 5 fans everywhere, a shining beacon in cyberspace, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5, the year the Great War to free Bab 5 came upon us all. This is the story of the last of the Babylon podcast. The year is 2016. The name of the place is the Babylon Project Podcast.
This is Maggie Egan, your ISN news anchor, and you're listening to the Babylon Project podcast.
Hello, Babylon 5 fans. Welcome to the Babylon Project podcast. This is Raul Wybera, and as always, I am joined by my great friend, Jim and Raul. How are you tonight, sir? Today, sir?
Hello, hey. Doing good. Doing good. We're going to wrap up season 2 today.
Yes, I cannot believe it. We are not talking about the episode, The Fall of the Night.
No.
No. As I have been corrected by people I trust, thank you, Jim. We are talking about the episode, The Fall of Night.
The Fall of Night, yes.
Not any particular night, but night in general.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably a little more apt for the episode, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. It's definitely the night is falling, and night watch is falling all over the place, all over everybody.
Or night watch is rising all over the place, which is even scarier.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yes, we're probably gonna see some boom today.
Oh, I think you're right.
Well, let us go ahead. And we're going to see something that Babylon 5 fans have been waiting 2 years to see. Not so much of a boom, but more of a flap.
Ah.
A certain Vorlon flapping sound in particular.
Yes, we're finally going to get a look at Kosh, or
are we?
Are we? Yeah.
I think the best way to put this into perspective is, Jim, can you give us a summary?
Okay.
Archive. Access. Initiated.
With their victory against the Narn, the Centauri began an expansion by invading territories held by the Pakmara and the Drazi. When this comes to the attention of Sheridan, he confronts Londo and is told that he should not interfere in matters that are outside of his jurisdiction. Earth sends Mr. Lance, a representative of the Ministry of Peace, to supposedly investigate the situation and to negotiate some kind of pact against the Centauri. But it is soon learned that he is actually there to secure a non-aggression pact with the Centauri. Lance was also accompanied by a member of the Night Watch, Mr. Wells. When a Narn war cruiser arrives at the station requesting sanctuary, Sheridan does not hesitate to grant the request. When Wells learns of this, he informs the Centauri of Sheridan's action, and the Centauri dispatch a warship of their own to Babylon 5. Sheridan informs the Centauri that he will use any means necessary to defend the Narn vessel while it is in Babylon 5 space, but he is eventually forced to destroy the Centauri ship. Lieutenant Keffer and his Zeta Squadron is dispatched to escort the Narn ship to safety when Keffer tracks and pursues a shadow vessel. He manages to record a picture of the shadow before his Star Fury is destroyed and he is killed. Sheridan, under orders to apologize to the Centauri, boards a core shuttle bound for the Zen Garden. As the shuttle approaches its destination, Sheridan sees a Centauri explosive device that was left behind by another passenger. He quickly jumps from the shuttle just before the bomb explodes, and it appears that he is doomed until Delenn appeals to Kosh to help. Kosh then leaves his encounter suit and appears as a being of light and saves Sheridan's life. Well, there it is.
Oh, there it is. Boom, boom, boom.
Oh yeah, lots of boom in this episode.
Lots of boom in this episode. This really was the episode, up until this point at least, the episode that everyone was waiting for on so many levels.
Mm-hmm. Even as intense as things have been the last several episodes, this one even ramped it up more.
Yeah. This, by many people's considerations, this really is sort of the epitome of a season cliffhanger.
Uh-huh.
You are set up with oh my God, what happens next? At the same time, you've got everything that well, not everything, but you've got so many answers closed and the chapter finished in such a neat little box.
But leaving the door wide open for a whole lot more.
Yeah, leaving you screaming for a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And they're going to stick it up another level from that at the end of next season. And it's not just the writing, but they had the perfect guest cast for this. How's that for a segue, sir?
Oh, yeah.
Character files open.
We had Roy Dotrice, I think that's how it's pronounced, as Frederick Lance. He appeared on Space 1999, a movie called Alien Attack.
Right.
He was the same character as he was in Space 1999. He was on Earth 2, Spider-Man, the TV series, Alien Hunter, and for those of us that are music fans, he played Mozart's father on Amadeus. He was Leopold Mozart.
Yep, and that actually is where in the front of my mind, that's where I remember him the most, is Mozart's father.
Uh-huh.
I completely forgot, though, about Space 1999. And what can I say? I'll admit I loved Space 1999.
I did too. I don't remember it very well because it's been so long since it's been on, but I was pretty young when that was on.
It's on either Hulu or Amazon Prime. I don't remember which. At least it was.
I know you can watch it on YouTube.
But I never made the connection, well, because obviously he was a whole lot younger on Space 1999.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have Jeff Conway. We've talked about him before. We had Julie Doland as pilot number 1. She was on Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and in the X-Files.
Yeah, she's one I really didn't recognize her from anywhere. You look at her IMDb entries, and she's a solid working actress.
Right.
But, yeah, she was the one pointing Keffer in the right direction. If I remember correctly.
Yeah. Didn't she also approach Lance also about...
No, that was the bridge. That was the bridge staffer.
Oh, that's right. Okay. And moving along, we had Rick Hamilton as Mitch, and nothing really noteworthy there. Robin Sachs as Nakal.
Right, who's sort of a Bab 5 favorite Narn.
Yeah, this was his 4th appearance.
I just found out he passed away from heart failure.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
in 2013.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea. And, I mean, he was still working up until, well into 2012.
And then finally, last but definitely not least, we had John Vickery appearing this time as Mr. Wells, the Night Watch.
Yes, we get to see him without makeup.
Without makeup and
even fewer redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
The character, not the person.
He lightens up his voice a little too. I noticed that when he first comes on, if I close my eyes, I don't hear Naroon's voice.
No, there's sort of what I can't think of the word, but there's a cadence to how Naroon speaks.
Yes, there is.
That's the word I'm looking for.
But you'll hear him a little bit closer to his Naroon voice in a clip that we'll play later.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be John Vickery's third appearance on Babylon 5.
And far from his last.
Yes.
Yeah. Naroon, of the recurring characters, Naroon is one of my favorites.
Oh, mine too.
Well, next to Bester, probably.
Yeah.
But it's not a huge... There's just something about the smoothness of the way he portrays the character that I love.
Yeah. He really fits that bill very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to the episode, sir?
I think so.
Initiating plot analysis.
Well, we had already talked about some boom. I guess we're not the only ones with that idea because Sheridan's got his Zeta Squadron, at least, out practicing for some boom.
Yeah, he's actually training a squadron to learn strategies used by the Centauri.
Yeah, that, I wonder, Chekhov's Star Fury?
Yeah.
You think we're going to see, if you're training them for something, you think we might see something like that before too long?
Yeah, well, of course, you're plus, the Centauri are really, really flexing their muscles. Supposedly the Narn thing is done now. And,
yeah, nice theory.
Yeah, and there's peace throughout the galaxy and everything, but the Narn, they're flexing their muscles a little bit. And Sheridan is not one to be unprepared.
Exactly. And if they don't get it, Susan's promising the pilot some real boom.
Yeah.
Some self-inflicted boom.
Yeah, she's going to issue them live rounds.
Yeah, what you're talking about there, that whole Centauri mentality, that's really the driving force behind this entire episode.
Uh-huh.
But we do get one moment of comic relief, and it's at the very beginning. That kind of gives you a hint of what we're in for. And it is probably, there's always, you don't see a whole lot of interaction between Veer and Lanier.
Not usually.
Not usually, but this is absolute classic moment in Babylon 5. We get the perspective from the attachés as far as what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have it?
I just happen to have it.
Let's play it.
Sometimes I get so close, and yet it seems I'm shut out of the important things.
It's a useless feeling. The ambassador is definitely going through some changes. He even looks different.
Indeed. And now with the military starting to stampede over everyone and everything.
People coming and going and secret meetings.
You never know what it's all about until later, when it's too late.
And they never listen to us. It makes me nervous. Same time tomorrow?
Sure.
And that look they shot each other when they both...
It's a comic moment, but it is so full of foreshadowing. And then you take it in perspective of the two paths that the characters follow.
And the people that they follow.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a perspective, but I think they're probably listened to a little more than they think. It's just that the picture is so darn big.
Yep. I actually think you're right on the money.
Yeah.
That's the lightest moment of the entire episode.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I think it's about the only spot they could squeeze in some lightness because the rest of it is one big, massive roller coaster.
It is a nonstop. Yeah. It goes and goes.
Mm-hmm. This episode is what's the term that they use to describe in music? Something like bolero. Starts off slow, continues to just get faster and faster and more intense. Continual accelerando or something.
Well,
It's
Bolero never really changes tempo. Bolero, believe it or not, was an exercise by Ravel in composition.
uh-huh.
Yeah, if there is a term for it, I'm not familiar with it.
The piece continues to just build an intensity. My wife's an orchestral player, she's not here, so I can't ask her. But it's continual. It's a continual increase in intensity.
Oh yeah. Oh, Bolero definitely does that in its instrumentation.
Mm-hmm. But that's what this episode is. And gee, it starts out with an emergency. You know, it's kind of ironic when you look at it at this point. That's an emergency, at least when you compare it to the end of the episode. But you already alluded to this. The Drazi and the Pakmara, they're wanting to talk to Sheridan because both sides are being attacked by Centauri.
Yeah, and well, but are they really being attacked? You know.
Well, the way they're both describing it is territory being incurred on.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it a matter of perspective.
Well, I would call it an invasion myself.
Well, you know, I think John Sheridan might agree with you.
Well, we know what the Centauri are up to.
Yeah,
They're making themselves great again.
take my people back to the stars, I believe was Lando's phrase back in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and this is what they're doing, and they're picking on little guys like the Drazi and the Pakmara.
Mm-hmm. I will say this: Sheridan's got a pair. He has no qualms about taking on Lando over the matter.
No.
And you notice there was a little bit of guilt in Lando's eyes before he went snarky.
Well, he said in defense of the Centauri, they were trying to create a buffer zone. Okay, Lando may have been feeling some guilt because he knows what's going on.
Yes,
but
he does.
He has no control over any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's making an effort at this point to distance himself from Morden, at least to some degree.
But Lando isn't in control of anything.
No.
I think Lando is actually more compassionate than he's letting on recently.
Or he's becoming so, I think.
You know, Lando knows what he has done.
Yeah.
And
he knows he caused all this.
Oh yeah, and it can't be taken back.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to maintain the hard line.
Yep. And you know, one of the ways to know that you're right is right after this, Mike Garibaldi sums it up nicely.
He does.
Lando's afraid and he's trapped.
Mm-hmm. It's like he's stuck on a wild horse is exactly how Mike puts it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this same conversation, Sheridan's trying to get Earth Dome involved. And right on cue, Mr. Lance from the Ministry of Peace shows up. Yay! Yeah. The fans go wild.
Yeah, and he's not alone.
Oh, we'll get to that. Yep. So problems are going to be solved, right?
Oh, yes.
Right? Mm-hmm.
More will be made.
Yeah. And just on a little bit of a side story, and kind of ticks through here, it seems that Mr. Keffer gets a lead on his spiders.
He's looking for that ship that he got a glimpse of, but could not record.
I want to take this moment, since we're right now with Keffer, to remind you of something that I had mentioned at the beginning of the season. The character was pushed on to Straczynski by management, by Warner Management. They wanted the young, studly, good-looking pilot, jockey. Okay. The character was pretty much pushed onto him. Straczynski took a little bit of exception to that. He felt it was an invasion of his creativity. And we're going to see what happens when you do that. He let him run through the season. Let's just leave it that they didn't try to push characters onto him anymore.
Ah.
But you had mentioned something about Mr. Lance having someone in tow.
Yes. And yeah, he brought Mr. Wells with him of the Night Watch.
Yes, a subsidiary of the Ministry of Peace, but an independent one.
Yeah, now up till this point, Night Watch has been pretty quiet. Hasn't stirred up a lot of problems, but that is going to change in this episode.
Oh yeah. On the surface, at least, this is a good thing because it means Earth is there for a full investigation of the Narn Centauri problem.
However, Wells throws in there to be sure everyone is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And the right thing, we'll find out towards the end of the episode exactly what that means.
It's all a matter of perspective. Just as a quick aside, Keffer gets his lead on where a shadow vessel has been seen and located.
Yeah, he gets it from the pilot, fellow pilot named Mitch. And Mitch really is not all that anxious to hand over the information, but he knows that Keffer wants it that badly.
Yep. Now, it's interesting. It just keeps snipping into Keffer's little chase in and out throughout this episode, with the frequency of it increasing until at the end it's just cutscene from one to the other and one to the other, back and forth.
Yeah, we get that a lot in Babylon 5.
But in a way, it's a completely unrelated story until at the very end.
Right.
And it'll all tie in together. I noticed Lance has an old fountain pen.
Oh.
That's one of my... I tend to do... it's funny. People look at me and laugh. I'm 53 years old, uber tech geek. I'm the guy that the 20-somethings come to when they need advice on making their tech work.
Right.
Tablet, digital ink, voice control over much of what but when it comes to actually writing, you've seen my show notes. It's on good paper, written in fountain pen. Unfortunately, when I was taking my notes, so smudges, my pen blew a leak right before.
Oh, okay, I saw that.
Yeah. My son had to help me. Unfortunately, I tend to use what's called archival ink in my fountain pen because of my day job. Archival ink, think Sharpie on steroids.
Oh,
it
okay.
it molecularly bonds to the cotton fibers in the paper.
Ah.
Or any other organic fibers that it happens to come into contact with.
Oh, how neat. However, this is not the Scribe podcast.
I was... Nope. But Lance is an old-fashioned sort of guy that seems like he is really trying to do the right thing in pursuit of peace, at least as he sees the right thing.
He does seem to be sincere in what he is trying to do.
Right.
But, okay, he's really trying to do the right thing in pursuit of peace, but it ain't going to happen because we got the Night Watch looking over his shoulder. Not only that, we're going to find out a little later on that he has an agenda that he's bringing along with him.
But his agenda is in pursuit of peace. And there are real historical parallels to his actions. We'll be seeing them. We'll be seeing that shortly. Maybe not in your lifetime or my lifetime, but certainly within our parents' lifetime. But speaking of peace, very next scene, a lone Narn heavy cruiser shows up, and it's looking for sanctuary.
Yeah, nobody thought there were any of those left running around, but here one shows up, and
we are saying is gift.
No singing.
Okay.
All right.
Gosh.
At any rate,
Yeah, move it along real quick, Jim.
All right, as I was saying, at any rate, this Narn cruiser is not in the best of shape.
No, it's in serious need of repairs, hence its request for sanctuary.
Yeah, they're kind of beat up.
And of course, Sheridan does grant it. It's, if nothing else, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, they've popped in on the opposite side of the station from Epsilon 3, so this is a secret now.
Right.
Nobody, Sheridan, Susan, nobody wants anyone to know that they're there.
At this point, the only people who know about it at all are the bridge staff.
Yep, and that's where it needs to stay, because
That's where it needs to stay.
Otherwise, it's going to inflame Londo.
And a whole lot of other people, probably. In the meantime, Mr. Wells, he's trying to recruit Susan.
Yeah, he's buttering her up pretty good.
Dumb. Really dumb.
Well, she kind of responds, though. She's like, well, I appreciate all these wonderful things you're saying about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hits her with the bullet.
Yeah, he's looking for a loyalty mole.
Yeah.
And how he defines loyalty, well, you've got this, I think.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
So I was wondering what you thought your next step might be.
Well, for the time being, I'm very happy right here. 5 years down the road, I don't know. Maybe running Babylon 5 if the captain decides to move on. Although the idea of captaining a starship has a certain appeal. Why?
Well, the Night Watch is becoming more important back home. We have considerable support within Earthdome. The way you're going, I have every confidence that you'll get that starship within 5 years or so, but why not shave a year or two off that? We could do that for you.
In exchange for?
Your support, your help. Your position here could benefit us as much as we can help you. You have access to certain information, certain reports about the comings and goings of various ships, people, and cargo. Activities which may strike you as potentially dangerous or disloyal. You could be of great service to Earth.
Does Mr. Lance know about this conversation?
Oh, no. The Night Watch is a separate division of the Ministry. I just thought we should be discreet.
Of course. Mr. Wells, as you say, I have access to a great deal of information. So I've been very much aware of the Night Watch for some time now. What I saw worried me. And now I see that my worries were justified.
Commander.
I've gotten where I am through hard work and loyalty. Loyalty to the people I work with, loyalty to Earth, and loyalty to the ideals of the Alliance. What you're asking violates all three. Okay, so maybe it takes me a few more years to get my own ship. But one way or another, I'll get there, and when I do, I'll have done it honestly. Without selling out a friend or betraying a confidence. My hands are clean. Are yours?
Now we know what kind of a slime ball Wells is.
Yeah, and loyalty, like I said, we're looking for a loyalty mole. We learn loyalty is defined as political correctness.
Well,
now I'm saying that in the original sense of the word. Remember, basically, what we've just discovered here, Wells is a Soviet-style political officer.
Yeah, yep. He's going to gather information, and anything you do and say will be used against you or anyone else that they can possibly use it against.
Yeah, a lot of people I remember they would talk about, and I guess because of some of Lance's comments, they'd make comparison to Nazi brown shirts, but really this is the classic Stalinistic political officer and political correctness as it was used in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, scary stuff.
Scary stuff. Remember, every ship, every military command had their political officer, which raises the question, who's really in charge, Lance or Wells?
You know what? I think they're two sides of the same coin.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, we do get the first leak outside of the bridge staff about the Narn cruiser, if you want to call it a leak. Sheridan lets Jakar be aware of what's going on. Jakar's happy.
Yeah, he's ecstatic. He feels like, okay, the promises that were made to him by Sheridan are going to be followed through. And Sheridan even doesn't offer, but promises that he's going to take the case to Earth.
Yeah. And in fact, he gives Jakar the information to go talk to Lance.
Exactly. But, I at that point doubted that Earth was ready to take sides on this.
Yeah. Well, they're ready to take sides if we'll postpone that discussion for just a few minutes.
Okay.
In the meantime, Wells is meeting with the Night Watch.
Yeah.
You remember what I said before about political correctness and political officer?
Yeah.
Look at what he does with Zach.
Oh my gosh.
That is, if you've ever studied this in history, I've one of the things I did a lot of study in college on. That is classic peer pressure techniques that the Soviets, both Soviets and Nazis used actually.
Yeah.
Isolate. You put the kind of pressure on with everyone, so all the eyes in the room. And then when he responds correctly, it's the wonderful, effusive praise.
Exactly. And all Zach got involved with this for is for 50 credits a week.
Yeah, $50 a week, basically.
Yeah. All he had to do, he was told, all he had to do was wear this armband and be visible.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd get $50, and he doesn't care anymore about the politics or those implications in The Man in the Moon. As a matter of fact, he told Wells that he is not comfortable with those particular night watch duties that they were expecting from him to report people that are saying things that don't agree with the party line.
And that is exactly the reason that Wells targeted Zach specifically. Zach was the one person in that room that had, at least initially, the cojones to stand up and say, wait a second. You can be certain that that Zach wasn't the only person in the room with those kinds of thoughts going through his head.
Oh, yeah. And
that's the methodology that political correctness is used in that kind of system shaping. The Soviets used it very effectively, very powerfully, and it's all based on doing it 1 inch at a time. It's incrementalism.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, and I mentioned this is just one area. There's a lot of others. This is areas where it was used. This stuff has been used in history. There's historical examples. It's, at least personal opinion, it's a pure exercise of evil in a lot of ways.
Well, it is. It is. It's something that's being used to subvert liberty and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Make
the little people fall in line.
Well, yeah, a person should be able to have their own views and express those views in the privacy of company that they choose to, without the fear of retribution.
Right.
For having an opinion that's differing with what's popular at the moment. And all that has gone out the window now.
All of that is going out the window right here with the Night Watch, and we'll see where it ultimately leads as this episode unfolds. It's a very chilling end, in fact.
Yes.
Speaking of chilling ends, the next little slice in with Kefir. It's almost like they're using Kefir's little quest as a shift for the scenes. But Mitch warns Kefir he's looking for death.
Yeah. Tosses him a data crystal and says, I'm done with this now. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You go out there and get yourself killed, and
it's your fault.
It's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Shifting scenes back to Lance. Jakar finally catches up with him. Ready to talk, ready to dialogue, ready to try to work some ideas out.
Yeah, he's, Jakar is very enthusiastic about this. He feels that something good is going to happen.
Yeah. And Lance is very enthusiastic too. I've never seen someone run away from someone quite as enthusiastically as Lance took off running away from Jakar.
Oh gosh, he couldn't get out of there fast enough.
No, what is up with that?
Well, I wonder if it's not EarthGov's policy. Londo laid down the law a couple of episodes ago. The Narn are no longer their own entity. They fall under the Centauri, and nobody should be talking to them about anything without going through the Centauri. And that is exactly what Lance seems to be illustrating, is that has become policy. Nobody's going to deal with Jakar.
I think there's some value to that.
Yeah.
I certainly think there's some value to that idea. Just as a side note regarding Jakar, that we do also find out that the repairs to that heavy cruiser, are taking a little longer than expected.
Oh, they're in rough shape.
Yeah, and very connected with that, and goes back to what you're saying. I think you're right. I think there's a little more than just that, because we find out that Lance is not happy at all that Sheridan is teaching their pilots Centauri combat techniques.
Oh, no, he isn't.
How to fight the Centauri.
Yeah. And then we find out why Lance was in such a hurry to get away from Jakar.
Right. We have Earth Dome's Neville Chamberlain moment. Yeah. He's signing a peace treaty, a non-aggression treaty with the Centauri.
Yeah.
In fact, he even uses Chamberlain's phrase of peace in our time.
Yep. And then we do find out that it is indeed policy that the Narn are not going to be dealt with as an independent group.
And you'll notice with this quote, just this quote alone, it is completely clear that any correlation or comparison between what's happening with EarthGov and the rise of Hitler's Germany, the Nazi comparisons are not an accident.
Well, and let's stop here and take a look at a plot point that I thought about, and everybody is now pretty well aware how far the Centauri are willing to go.
Right.
After using those mass drivers on Narn, the Centauri are not above genocide as a technique to assert themselves.
Okay.
They are way too powerful politically, and they have become way too powerful militarily, and so Earth doesn't want to wind up with another war.
I cannot disagree with that. I cannot disagree with that.
Because I have to wonder, if I recall a few episodes ago, that it was also said that Earth has not quite recovered from the Earth-Minbari conflict. So Earth is not even ready for another conflict.
Yeah, Sheridan makes that point, actually, in that ISN news episode.
Yeah.
That's what you're referring to.
Yes.
And I am absolutely certain that that's going to be part of how it's kind of sold to the public. That and the whole idea of, you can create peace through submission, which is something that history has proven a fallacy again and again, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that's certainly how it's sold. We're going to find out that even though you're right, when we learn a little bit more about Clark, there's more to it than meets the eye. Don't forget, Sheridan's already involved up to his ears enough to end up in a court-martial, as far as questioning some of the actions behind Clark's presidency, all the way to his rise to power, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's all cumulative.
Yep.
And I just had another interesting thought. Your comments on the Centauri's power may very well have been part of the drive behind some of what Clark's doing, that we'll find what Clark's doing at the time. And not just the Centauri, but the Earth Minbari War is only 10 years old. So there's some definite sting from that still. There's got to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's, we're still rebuilding.
Uh-huh.
So.
Yep. And in the time that Lance leaves, we find out that, yes, indeed, there is a mole on the command staff.
Yeah.
That young lady, never noticed her wearing an armband for night watch.
I'm sure they'd be glad to give her one.
I rather think if Susan had taken the offer, she wouldn't have been asked to wear an armband either. But, well, as far as the peace treaty, there's a phrase I picked up from watching Babylon 5. Susan and John are honked. Majorly honked.
Well, not so much Susan as John, though. He's really unhappy. As a matter of fact, he is questioning his decision to become a part of Earth Force.
He's becoming ashamed of his uniform.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Susan does give him his Christmas present a little early.
Yeah, well, Hanukkah present, Christmas present, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Yeah, actually, that's how she phrases it. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's a piece of the Black Star.
Yeah. Piece of the Black Star. And Sheridan kind of looks at it at first going, oh, well, yeah, I don't have one of these. So what is it?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of foreshadowing, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of foreshadowing, Susan almost sounds prophetic at one point.
It's going to be a new year in a little over a week. Maybe 2260 is the year that we redefine it. Make it mean something again.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where we're headed.
I think your word is better. I think prophetic is better than foreshadowing.
Yeah. That's what we're coming to in the third season.
Yes, and not to give us any sort of a break, John and Sheridan might be honked, but Lando is positively cranky. Turns out he knows about the Narn cruiser.
Yeah, he found out.
Not good. Sheridan certainly knows the company's coming, and they try to get the Narn out of there, but too late.
Yeah. The Centauri, they pull a heck of a stunt here.
Oh, gosh, yeah. They're throwing threats right and left. It's suddenly absolutely a military situation, and you've got Lance sitting there still chattering about peace in their time, basically, and how you're going to ruin everything. Short end of it, Lance gets ejected, fighters get launched.
Yeah, and we are going, it looks like we're going to war.
It sure seems that way, because Sheridan absolutely promises deadly force if his ships are attacked.
And he orders the station's defense grid to be armed and targeted on the Centauri cruiser.
Yep. Sort of the follow-up of an earlier Chekhov's gun moment when Franklin's dad upgraded their system.
Uh-huh.
Remember what he said back then?
Oh.
That when General Franklin said that when he's done with their upgrades, they'd be able to take on a heavy cruiser.
Ah.
Well, there's a heavy cruiser sitting right outside the station, and they don't simply target the fighters in the Narn vessel. They target the station itself.
Yeah.
Which is insane. They don't simply target the station. They just flat out open fire.
It's downright hubris is what it is.
Yeah.
We think the Centauri are pretty strong, and they think so too.
I think we find out that they have a little bit of a misconception of just how strong they are, because, yeah, we get some boom. The Centauri blow off one of the loading pylons on the station. Thank God that's all they hit.
Uh-huh.
And the phrase Sheridan yells "time on target" when he lets the guns loose.
Uh-huh.
Military phrase. Your different ordnance is being timed to all hit at once. So Sheridan's not fooling around. his goal is to blow the Centauri ship to hell.
He's completely within his rights to do so, because these guys they're either insane or something. But
how many Centauri are on the station?
Yeah.
Not to mention, do they really want to pick a fight with the Minbari at this point?
Well, they apparently think they can do it.
That's the... No, you came out, you used the perfect word, hubris. You're not going to get much more hubris than that. Or, gee, what about the Vorlons? There might be only one Vorlon on the station, but they seem to be, at least based on what we saw with the pilot, they seem to be pretty protective of their ambassadors.
They are.
Mm-hmm. Short of it, you know what? The new defense grid works pretty good.
Indeed it does.
Yeah.
Major boom.
Major boom. And, of course, Lance's response, Sheridan shouldn't have shot back.
Yeah, baloney. And what did they expect him to do?
Mm-hmm.
He is working within the rules of engagement exactly the way it's supposed to be. He has 250,000 people to protect.
Mm-hmm.
He has given his word to the Narn cruiser, plus he's got his fighters out there.
Yep. And, even his promise to the Narn cruiser, he was following the regulations about a vessel in distress. He did what the regs obligated him to do, even if he didn't want to, he was honoring both the spirit and the letter of the regulations.
Yeah, but it must be Lance, under his orders, has been told not to recognize the Narn in any way, shape, or form.
And this is the creepiest part of all. Who steps in to moderate? Wells.
Yeah.
And it turns out both Wells and the Joint Chiefs back, and you couldn't see my finger quotes, listeners, but Wells and the Joint Chiefs back Sheridan. I don't know if I want that kind of backing, frankly, because he turns around and it's like, yes, what you did, but every decision that he made leading up to it is questionable.
Right. Yeah.
End result, Sheridan's ordered to apologize.
Yeah.
In 1 hour.
More crapola.
More crapola, yes. Like I said earlier, who's really in charge?
Apologize, and as John says, apologize for what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, well, it almost... I don't know if it's Clark trying to think of a way to get rid of Sheridan. It's like humiliating him into resigning, or what? Obviously, and hey, at least Sheridan gets to write his own speech, because, like Wells said, it's the thought that counts.
Yeah. Well, Sheridan's position may not be in jeopardy at the moment, but when Lance reports back, it definitely would be.
Actually, I think it's going to be less Lance reporting back and more Wells reporting back.
Okay.
You're getting it going back to political correctness and political officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sheridan is of the same opinion, because we get a shortcut scene change of Keffer going off on his own, and then we come back to hear Sheridan's apology.
Yeah.
I like that. Remember, an apology isn't necessary. If you go back to the original Greek, apologia, you're not talking about asking for forgiveness. Oh, gee, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. The original meaning of apologia, is a defense of what you did. It's a defense of your action, or a defense of your beliefs. So I think Sheridan gives a very good apology.
Yeah, it's not exactly what's been asked for, and at this point, it's more of a rehearsal of what he... probably trying to formulate in his mind exactly what he's actually going to say.
I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we had to defend ourselves against an unwarranted attack.
I'm sorry that your crew was stupid enough to fire on a station filled with 250,000 civilians, including your own people. And I'm sorry I waited as long as I did before I blew them all straight to hell. As with everything else, it's the thought that counts.
It's thought that counts. I am absolutely convinced that Sheridan was going to say pretty much just what he said there to the rest of the ambassadorial staff.
I seriously doubt he would word it that way. That would be very undiplomatic, and he would be sticking his head out plenty far enough to get it lopped off.
I think he's enough of a realist to know that that lop is coming anyway.
Well, the time isn't right.
I don't think... I'll grant... let me rephrase that then. The message would have been unmistakable.
Yeah.
Even if the wording wasn't exactly the same, I suspect that the message would have been unmistakable just based on what we've seen from the character, not just in the past, but knowing the kinds of things he's willing to do in the future.
Yeah. I think...
Remember, this is the guy who held Morden for hours or days with no cause.
Well, that's very true. But in his mind, he did have a cause.
Same here.
It was personal.
Mm-hmm. And this, believe me, this was personal.
Well,
for him.
He could, but, he could completely end his career here. And he's a pretty important cog in the wheel. So I think he's more, that rehearsal was more of venting than anything else. But we'll never know.
We'll never know. Yeah, the course of events kind of gets rid of the need for an apology, shall we say?
Yeah.
Because we get a whole lot of cuts back and forth now. Keffer finds his, as the fandom called it online at the time, Keffer finds his battle crab.
Yeah, he does. And, by some miracle, that Narn cruiser managed to get away. And we're supposed to be providing escort, but Keffer gets word from his onboard computer that something weird is going on, and he's going to go chase it.
And one of the big themes in Babylon 5 is consequences.
Yeah, and he suffers the major ones.
Yeah. You notice in the gathering of the ambassadors, Londo is pretty much abandoned and alone.
Yeah, well... he's about, as you would say, he's about honked everybody off by this point.
Yeah, I don't think there's many races left that aren't, that have very much goodwill at all to the Centauri.
Well, of course, if he's gone after the Pakmara and the Drazi, they're all thinking, when are we next? Yep.
Which is why an Earth Force officer apologizing is going to be so damaging.
It's absolutely humiliating. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that it's personally humiliating for Sheridan, but the degree, not all military victories are made with guns. It would be a military political coup for an EarthGov officer of Sheridan's rank and prominence to have to issue that kind of an apology. I mean, it basically validates the Centauri aggression. It's one of the reasons why I was like, is Sheridan going to really give that kind of an apology?
Well, part of what they're working for, EarthGov is working for, is appeasing the Centauri.
Yeah, but like you said, we will never find out because while Sheridan is on his way to the Zen Garden where this is going to occur, we hear ominous music. And we know what that means.
Yeah, did you notice the entire time he was headed toward the transport tube, did you see the looks he was getting from the Centauri as he walked by?
Yeah.
Every time there were Centauri, they looked at him like he was something that they had scraped off the bottom of their shoe.
I'm amazed he didn't have a security detail with him.
I sure would have.
Yeah. Yep. Jakar grabs Susan and wants to know if there's anything he can do to help. And, I appreciate the sentiment, but I think Susan was right.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jakar and Londo in the same place would just inflame things even more.
Yeah. And we find that Kefir learns the price of letting show management force him on to the show.
Uh-huh. Yep.
More boom.
Yep. Bye-bye, Kefir.
Yep.
And it's kind of too bad. I like the guy, really.
So did I.
Yeah.
So did I. It does serve a very important purpose in the show that we're going to find out shortly, and part of a setup for next season.
Yep.
Now, the transport, it's a low-grav situation. You remember the station is a rotating hull, which means in the center, in the very center, you're in a microgravity situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, technically, if you get into the science, everyone is technically weightless. Your feeling of weight and your feeling of gravity is kind of a simulation based on the rotation of the main hull.
Uh-huh.
But Delenn and Kosh, and this is an important piece, Delenn and Kosh go off to the side away from everyone, out of sight, for a private conversation.
Yeah, they're definitely in cahoots.
Mm-hmm. And the need for an apology. We find out why there's not going to be a need for an apology. Centauri assassins leave a bomb for Sheridan. He sees the bomb and jumps out.
Yeah.
So, more boom. Now, this was one of the things that had come up a lot. A lot of people in the forums were discussing this at the time of the show. He jumps out. Now, he's heading toward the ground, along the radius of the station.
Yeah.
He's obviously, it's what's pushing him to the floor is really just his momentum. And, of course, the circulation of the air, that's going to drive him toward the ground as well.
And, and that blast will help
and
a little bit, too.
and the air pressure from the blast. The bottom line is, from a radial perspective, he's probably not going to hit the station all that hard.
Not really.
From an angular perspective, though, from the rotation, if that station is going 60 miles an hour, if that's your relative speed, your relative velocity, it might not be vertical up and down that he hits hard, but he's going to get smacked like he was running in the freeway from whatever is rotating underneath him.
Yeah.
So it would be very unlikely that he'd have a chance of surviving that.
Yeah, he'd get banged up pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, the rescue crews cannot get there in time.
Yep, Susan's hollering for the rescue, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Minutes when seconds are needed. But Kosh to the rescue.
Yeah, and he comes out of the encounter suit and appears as a winged being.
Every species idea of an angel, actually.
Uh-huh. Almost.
Almost. We'll get to the exception.
And then, now the amazing thing is Kosh has now exposed himself, even though everybody sees something different. But if this isn't proof that Sheridan is extremely important to the future, that Kosh would do this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Kosh was right. Everyone recognized him, with the exception. The only good thing about this is that Delenn and Kosh were off to the side. They were away from everyone. The people who witnessed this did not know it was Kosh. Well, one person figured it out, and that was Sheridan, obviously.
Yeah, and Kosh confirmed it with a nod.
Yep. And then went away back to his encounter suit and kind of went into hiding of sorts.
Yeah.
In the follow-up conversation with Delenn, here's what's interesting. If you listen to Sheridan's comments, yes, he's amazed by the Vorlons and who they are and who they are seen as, and the obvious connections with interactions with Earth history. But that awe is tempered by some seeds of doubts being planted. or at least the Vorlons being knocked down a notch or two from the pedestal on which he held them, because Sheridan sees what they're doing is just downright manipulative. Makes if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And, in a way, it's kind of fitting. Remember what Kosh is teaching Sheridan to do. Don't assume that the lessons have necessarily stopped. They're just not center points to the story. Sheridan's being trained to fight legends. So between Mr. Sebastian in the last episode, I think Sheridan is gaining some enhanced perspective on the Vorlons.
Uh-huh.
Now, Delenn is concerned because she's afraid that this will put the Shadows on alert, but that it should be okay because the public knows nothing about the Shadows or anything connected with him at this point. So that should be enough to keep them from taking action.
We can hope.
Yeah. Nobody knows. Famous last words. About your comment about the exception. All the races are amazed because, like I said, everyone saw their idea of an angel or a being of light.
Mm-hmm.
But with one exception. Take a guess who?
Yeah, well, that would be none other than Londo.
Mm-hmm. Saw nothing.
Yeah. Well,
Minion of the Dark.
We know that Londo he has no spirit left.
Yeah. At least no spirit of light left. Yes.
No, he has been overwhelmed. He has no control over anything that is going on around him. All he can do is respond.
Right. And now we start to see the real tragedy of Londo Mollari beginning to unfold.
Yeah.
And then it comes into the idea of the consequences. In the short term, the consequences of at least Mr. Lance's actions. Remember I made the World War II comparisons?
Uh-huh.
Well, it wasn't that long after Neville Chamberlain made his treaty with Hitler that the Nazi war of expansion began. And just as we see the Centauri expanding their aggression, as we get to these little vignettes.
Yeah, that one with him standing there screaming at the non-aligned ambassadors.
Yes, and the fist shaking in the air.
Yeah.
Look at some old newsreels.
Yeah.
And then Clark begins arresting people for thought crimes now.
Yeah.
We had the Nazi comparison. Let's go and flip over to the Soviet side.
Yep, correct thinking.
Incorrect thinking. Political correctness reaches its ultimate intended purpose. That poster being hung is scary.
Yeah. Well, we can get into that a little more. Now, we can get into that a little more in a little bit. Now, we get Susan providing a season closing monologue. Now, if you recall, she opened the season with a monologue.
Yes. And it's a beautiful piece of writing.
It's quite the bookend. And then now, before I play this, we'll go back for just a second to Wells talking to Zach.
Okay.
And Wells got Zach to admit that there was a shop owner in the Zocalo who was speaking out against the government.
Yeah, basically just complaining against the government.
Right. So, anyway, with that in mind...
It was the end of the Earth year 2259, and the war was upon us. As anticipated, a few days after the Earth-Centauri Treaty was announced, the Centauri widened their war to include many of the non-aligned worlds. And there was another war brewing closer to home, a personal one whose cost would be higher than any of us could imagine.
Now, at this point, we cut to Zach witnessing the shop owner being arrested and the sign that says closed by order of the Ministry of Peace, pending allegations of sedition.
We came to this place because Babylon 5 was our last best hope for peace. By the end of 2259, we knew that it had failed. But in so doing, it became something greater. As the war expanded, it became our last best hope for victory. Because sometimes peace is another word for surrender. And because secrets have a way of getting out.
Another word for surrender.
Yeah. There are people that I know for whom that last scene, or that scene we just saw, really has real meaning today. And in fact, I'll confess, I have, in my past, with schoolwork and with some stuff, I've visited, I had the opportunity to visit the Soviet Union embassy in New York.
Ah.
I've been to countries where what happened to that shop owner would happen today, or worse.
Yeah.
That's not just drama. That, I don't think Americans understand sometimes just how much meaning there is behind a scene like that.
We haven't experienced anything like that.
It is chilling. I've got friends throughout the world that have to live with that kind of concern or kind of fear or kind of risk.
Yeah. Hopefully it never happens.
At least not here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then it closes with secrets getting out.
Yeah.
How did ISN get Keffer's recording?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question.
You know what I was talking about before about the perfect cliffhanger?
Yeah.
All of the answers wrapped up so nice and neat. And then this one little question. Where did this come from? How did this get out?
Yeah. Who intercepted it?
Right. We really don't find out either, do we?
No. Keffer does eject
his recording device, his log.
Yes. And sends it back towards the jump gate. Who got their hands on it? And how did they know to get their hands on it?
And even more important, why did it go to ISN instead of the proper authorities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I say that because we do know that Clark's administration really isn't that thrilled with the idea of this getting out.
Not at all.
So, wow, what a way to end the season. To set up the next.
Uh-huh. So, lots and lots of boom, a very dark episode.
Lots and lots of boom.
And, yeah, scary stuff that I hope I never experience.
Mm-hmm. But it's one of those timeless, you said long ago that one of the reasons Babylon 5 retains its relevance is that the themes are historically timeless.
They are. It happened over and over and over again.
And I'm not going to get distracted into an extended discussion on it, but I look at around the world today, and I don't know when people are going to listen to this or not. And I could have said it back in 1995 when this episode aired, and I can say it today with very different circumstances. And I'm sure if someone's listening to the show in 5 years, they could say the same thing. I can see where in world events, the danger of something like this is still very real.
Well, of course it is. All you need is just someone that's paranoid enough that they worry about what others are saying and thinking about them. And that person in power.
Yeah. Or that combination of persons in power.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not, I'm assuming, and just, making it clear, you're not just talking about Zach and his caving where political correctness is concerned.
No.
Nope. It's the whole big picture. It's what I think makes this such an incredible story. And it's a beautiful setup for the next season.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow. We have, as I expected, gone very long in this episode.
Yeah. Well, it's one that needed to be.
It's one that needed to be. And any closing thoughts on you now that we've chewed this through?
No. Not really any closing thoughts on the episode specifically, because I think we pretty well covered it. But when I sat down to add my notes to your notes,
Mm-hmm.
And I do stop and start the recording quite a bit, it still went by just zoom. I couldn't believe how much time had actually passed.
Yeah.
Watching this and taking the notes and how fast it moved.
You're not the only one for whom that happened. And when I looked at the clock on the episodes where this happens, having the DVDs, this is an episode that has one of Joe Straczynski's commentaries. I didn't have time to sit back through and listen through his commentary on it.
I did not either, and I will be doing that, though.
I will be doing that as a follow-up, certainly, yes, I agree. Though I will also note that if we had, before this episode, we'd be talking about it for another half hour.
Oh, at least.
Folks, this is what science fiction, let me rephrase that. This is what good science fiction is about.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why, if you remember, if you're also fans of the Sci-Fi Diner podcast a few years ago, I had guested on a discussion about what is good science fiction. This is good science fiction.
It is. It's great science fiction.
Yeah. My thoughts, well, everything you said. But I will add one more thought to it. With an ending like this, oh my gosh, just wait till season 3.
Yep. I did take the opportunity to watch 4 or 5 episodes at the beginning of season 3. And it's a barn burner.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What's fun about it, watching it through this time. Now, my son's watched the series before, but he likes sitting with me when I'm watching and making my show notes, because we get into little conversations about the story. And some of the stuff, at least, that comes into my notes, he kind of helps tickle my brain about.
Ah.
So it's a real blast there.
Well then.
Oh, anything else?
No, I think I'm about done.
Yep. One thing that is certainly clear, though, is that there was boom today.
Oh.
There was a whole lot of boom today.
A lot of boom today. There will be more tomorrow.
Yep. Certainly will be. There's always boom tomorrow.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
So long.
Podcast terminated. Thank you for listening to the Babylon Project podcast. You can email Raul and Jim at the Babylon Project podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at the Babylon Project Podcast. On the internet, we are at babylonprojectpodcast.wordpress.com. To subscribe to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed on the webpage.